Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Plinky Quickie. Today we're going to talk all about the pitch and degree parameters. Now, these are both pretty straightforward features, but because they are quite similar to one another, I think Plinky users can get a little bit confused about how to use each one. So in this video, I'll explain their similarities and their differences, and also show you some creative ways that you can use them in your patches. So both the pitch and degree parameters share a pad. It's this one right here, which makes sense because they do have similar functions. With both parameters, you can change the pitch of the oscillators and transpose them, but not quite in the same way or for the same purpose. So let's start with pitch. So I'm going to navigate to the pitch parameter here. If you play a note and just start adjusting the pitch, you'll notice first that you can really fine-tune the oscillators. The Plinky, like most desktop synths, is tuned by default to 440 Hz. But if you're using it with other gear or acoustic instruments, this might need to be adjusted a bit in order for Plinky to play nicely with other gear. For example, I play in an orchestra in Germany and we tune to 442 Hz, so my internal reference pitch when I play the trumpet is actually slightly higher. But the pitch parameter isn't just for fine tuning. It can also be used for transposition. I think a lot of us who use synths and Eurorack systems fall into the trap of having every piece of music we play be in the key of C. No matter what scale we choose, C is always the root note. We tune our oscillators to C, and the desktop synths like the Plinky have a default root note of C. Now, this can get a bit boring, especially if you're playing a longer set or recording an album and every single piece is in the same key. So it's nice to change it up sometimes and use a different root note. The whole numbers in the pitch parameter represent semitones. So if you want to play in the key of A, for example, or have A of your root note, that's 3 semitones down. Then your root note, which are the lit pads here on your Plinky, are all A octaves. If I get out of that menu, you can see the A there. If you want to change up the root note or a key you're playing in, but you don't really know where to start, I suggest looking up the circle of fifths. That's a great place to start for natural sounding key changes. So, how can we use pitch creatively for sound design? Well, one classic use case in synthesis is vibrato. To do that, I'm going to patch a fast-moving sine wave LFO to the pitch parameter. So I'm going to tap pitch and tap LFO X. We're going to give it just a little bit of modulation for now so the vibrato is not too crazy. We've got to give the LFO some depth, and I want it to go relatively fast. All right. So I know I said I didn't want that to be too crazy. So, whoops, I'm going to bring that modulation way down. It's also perhaps a little bit too fast. Let's slow it down a little bit. All right, that's a little bit more appropriate for a vibrato. Now, of course, you can adjust the LFO rate to your taste and experiment with different waveforms to get the vibrato just right. Adjusting the pitch or frequency in this way is also known as FM synthesis, the FM standing, of course, for frequency modulation. As the LFO enters the audio rate range, the timbre of the oscillator we're modulating starts to take on different characters. Let's try that. Let's even give that a little bit more modulation so you can hear it even better. Yeah, that's what we want. We're going to adjust the rate again. Oh yeah, listen to that. Oh, I went into the clocked LFOs there for a minute. Let's give this a little bit more modulation to get something even more different. Oh yeah. So the LFOs on the Plinky can get into the low audio rate range, and it's a really fun technique to explore. Definitely try out different waveforms. The square wave is also fun. Let's just change this to a square wave. Oh yeah. We're going to adjust the rate. And you can definitely find some sweet spots in there to get really great sounds. Let's give that even more modulation just to hear what it sounds like when we go really extreme. Oh yeah. So many possibilities here. Now things start to get even more wild when you cross-modulate using additional LFOs. I won't go down that rabbit hole now, but you could try, for example, patching another fast-moving LFO to modulate the rate of the first one, and things get wild. You're welcome. Have fun exploring that. Okay, so now that we're clear on pitch, let's talk about scale degree. This parameter also transposes your pads, but instead of a fine-tuned absolute transposition, the degree parameter transposes everything within the chosen scale. So I'm currently in C major, and all of my lit up root pads are C. Now if I navigate to the degree parameter here and start turning the encoder, you can see those root pads shifting downward. That's because we're transposing everything up. It sounds a little bit paradoxical, but that's actually what's happening here. And you can see there's one pad that remains lit up here no matter how far I move it. And that's just sort of a reference for how far you've moved up the scale degree. So the next note in the C major scale would be a D. So this is now a C. If I move up, it's now a D. Then I move up again, and that same pad is in E, in F. So this is not transposing the pitch, really. It's just transposing the scale degree. So if I go all the way to extreme here, then this is a very high C, 2 octaves above, and I think we even reach the upper limit of the Plinky's range there. So the whole number values in the degree parameter represent scale degrees and not semitones. By the way, this will also transpose any existing sequencer patterns you have programmed to this particular preset. So this can be a fun way to get more mileage out of an existing pattern. My favorite way to use the degree parameter is for generative sequencing. I've already got 2 very in-depth videos on YouTube all about generative sequencing here on the Plinky. So if you're interested in that, definitely check out those videos, but I will give you a brief demo here. So in this patch, I've got an 8-step sequence, and each step is just programmed with the root note. In this case, a C. Now I'm going to modulate the degree parameter with the random pad, which will randomize the scale degree within a given range. So let's give that some range. Now my one-note sequence is a randomized sequence within my set scale. You can also use this to get variation out of an existing pattern. Again, check out my video on generative sequencing for more on that subject. In this patch, instead of randomizing the scale degree per sequencer step or pad press, I've patched a smooth random LFO to the degree parameter. You can already see the lights kind of going nuts here, so when I press a pad, the Plinky is moving around my chosen scale all by itself. Yeah. All right, that was your Plinky Quickie on pitch and scale degree. If you found this useful, please let me know in the comments, and I will see you next time.